Oh, sorry about that. You're dying. Bitch.
Throughout 2012, a retired U.S. State Department engineer, Byron Smith, was the victim of multiple break-ins. On November 22nd, Thanksgiving Day, at Wits End, he put in motion a series of events that would give great question to the Castle Doctrine, a law that allows homeowners to use lethal force within their homes without prosecution. His choices ultimately taking the lives of two young teenagers, cousins, Nick Brady and Haile Kifer. Here, we look at the lives of Nick and Haile, two great friends caught up in a string of poor decisions, and Byron, the now 78-year-old man whose frustration led him to premeditation in the first degree, branding him a killer in this, Episode 4 of Something Criminal. Little Falls is a quaint little township in Morrison County, Minnesota. It is a beautiful stretch of land with sprawling green fields and tall pines and birch trees that turn a golden fire in autumn. Weather is mild here, with seasons turning almost picture-perfect versions of themselves throughout the year. During the spring and early summer, Little Falls can witness many of the regular tornadoes that push north up the Mississippi. Little Falls and its municipals have a population total of only 8,000, and it is a long stretch of land, following the winding Mississippi River to Fort Ripley, one of the many landmarks built during the pioneer and civil ages of America's birth. Little Falls itself is the boyhood home of Charles Lindbergh, the inventor, author, and activist who gained worldwide fame for being the first pilot to do a non-stop flight from New York to Paris in 1927. Needless to say, life is quiet in Morrison County, just the way the locals like it. Crime was almost non-existent. It was such a rare occurrence that residents would often turn the blind eye, hesitant to admit anything could put a mark on the immaculate record of safe living in central Minnesota. Born June 11, 1948, in Little Falls, Byron is the second son to parents Ted and Ida, both involved with the Army, with Ted being a decorated pilot who spent time in a POW camp. A smart and tenacious young boy, Byron was an avid outdoorsman. Joining Scouts at a young age, he became an Eagle Scout with 51 merit badges, which is more than double the amount required. His focused nature and aptitude for learning wasn't limited to Scouts, and he graduated from Little Falls High in 1966, ranked second in his class for academics. After earning a diploma at the University of Minnesota in 1968, he was inducted into the United States Air Force as an electrical engineer. His streak of excellence continued, and his superiors selected him for advanced B-52 navigation and bombing training. After a grueling year, he graduated and volunteered for in-flight duty in Vietnam, earning a number of medals. Returning from Vietnam, Byron pursued higher education at Cal Poly, specializing in wideband distribution systems. Hired immediately upon graduating with the U.S. State Department, he spent the next 20 years of his life designing and installing security systems in foreign embassies. Byron's father passed away in 1998, and Ida in 2009, shortly after Byron retired and returned to his family home in Little Falls on Elm Street. Byron would spend his spare time fixing up the house or around the many parks and wetlands in Little Falls, armed with his beloved Nikon D800, a professional camera that costs a small fortune. He settled right back into life in Little Falls and was well liked by the community. He was an active member of commerce and heavily involved in the Scouts Club. Life was peaceful, and Byron, a private man, was content. He took regular trips to Minneapolis on antique hunts, adding to his collection of world souvenirs, usually paid for in cash. Byron would keep large sums of money in his dresser drawer, convinced his 11-acre property was safe. In the summer of 2011, a then 63-year-old Byron decided to hire a group of teenagers to help him out around his house. Chopping wood, washing tractors, it was all in line with him wanting to give back to the community that raised him. He was good to the kids. He would feed them, he paid them well, let them freely enter and leave his house. Byron felt as though this was laying the groundwork for solid ethics, just as work like this did for him as a child. Byron did not work side by side with the teens, however. He was a single man on his own, and was careful to avoid any situation that might be misconstrued. Next summer, when the teens returned in late May looking to work for Byron again, he declined. Byron never told them why, but his neighbor, Bill Anderson, later told reporters that Byron had told him things had went missing last summer, that his tractor was messed up and things in his house were moved around or just not right. He had given the kids complete run of his property. They were his prime suspects. Although Byron never intended on retribution and simply moved on with his life. A lesson learned. June 2012, Byron's doorbell began ringing late at night, at least once a week between midnight and 2 a.m. He would answer, but no one was ever there. In July, $3,200 in cash went missing. Byron thought perhaps he had misplaced it. It was unlikely, but even if he reported it, the cash would never be returned, so he dismissed the loss. Throughout August and September, he experienced a number of lost or missing items. This was not a common thing for the extraordinarily organized Byron. He was an itemizer, and years of paying attention to the smallest of details meant that someone had to be breaking in. Paranoia set in, and he started a compulsive use of deadbolts and locks when 2 guns went missing in September. He replaced the missing firearms immediately, fearing his safety in his house without protection. In October, with the late-night 9-door continuing and growing more frequent, he reversed the doorbell tone. The frequent ghost ringing had him believing perhaps he was going crazy or maybe senile. However, when the doorbell rang again that night, in reverse, he was certain someone had to be playing pranks. Byron stopped going out. He was sleeping maybe only 4 hours a night. The relentless invasions of his private home, despite his best attempts at security, had him in a constant state of distress. The once mild-mannered and friendly Byron began to unravel, each incident pushing him further down the spiral into an almost neurotic state of compulsion. Unavoidably, on the weekend of October 14th, Byron was out of town. With his truck clearly absent, thieves took advantage of the empty house, breaking in and this time stealing over $50,000 in goods, including a Rolex watch Byron's father left him, his army medals, and Byron's beloved camera. Beaten, Byron finally went to authorities, bringing evidence with him, a panel from his door that had been kicked in, marked with the imprint of a running shoe. He waited for over an hour and a half for a deputy to see him, and when it became apparent no one was coming, he left. Byron began reorganizing his house and garage, finding any kink in security he could. Rearranging furniture and identifying entry and cover points, his years as a security engineer let him have a clear vision of safe housing his own house. He set up security cameras and moved his '69 Nova and 2 motorcycles into the garage. And on the morning of Thanksgiving 2012, parked his truck a block and a half away in front of what he thought was a police patrolman's house, perhaps hoping it would be safe there, and then walked home. Haile Elaine Kifer, born on October 17, 1994. She is the second child to parents Jay and Jenny. A tight household, she had loving guidance from her parents with a protective older brother, Dylan. A senior at Little Falls High, she was a sports-centric girl, involved in gymnastics, diving, softball, and cross-country. She was a competitive girl who notoriously played games regardless of injuries. Pretty, popular, smart, and athletic, she could have been the poster child for Little Falls, with boundless potential, confidence, and a driven personality. Haile worked several part-time jobs: KFC, Pizza Ranch, the cinema. She kept busy. However, she always found time to go hiking or camping, 4x4ing or hunting, or just plain hanging out with cousins Nick and Rachel. Balancing school, her many jobs, outings, and parties, it was an amazement she still had time for her life at home, the loving and supporting environment bolstered by her mother and father and her brother Dylan, and backed by the Schaeffel clan. Somewhere along the way, as with most teenage kids, she began to experiment with alcohol and drugs. Drinking at parties to smoking a joint, quickly, as it often does, one thing led to another, and she started to crave substance. It didn't matter what that substance was. Experimentation to Haile meant take it, and if you get high, it's a keeper. Nicholas Alexander Brady was born on March 21, 1995 in Little Falls, Minnesota, the second child to parents Jason and Kimberly. A younger Nick was an active part of a youth group and attended Mary of Lourdes Elementary School, the Church Baptist school in Little Falls. Attending Little Falls High School, he was an active teen, an avid wrestler on Little Falls' partnered school team, Pillager High. He enjoyed the outdoors, 4x4ing, camping, and hunting. Nick took full advantage of his surroundings. His parents, Jason and Kim, were a bit of a wild couple, both being cited multiple times in civic and criminal court. This caused subtle ripples in his upbringing. However, the tight clan mentality the family shared meant that Nick was always being pointed in the right direction by someone who loved him. It is unclear what role Father Jason played during Nick's formative years, or the impact that his presence or absence may have had on him. However, I was able to uncover his arrest sheet that suggests he was living in nearby Randall and may have been incarcerated during this tragic time. Bonnie and Steve Schaeffel, Nick's grandparents, played a major role in their lives. Their house was a haven for the Brady, Kifer, Schaeffel family, regularly having everyone over for dinners or gatherings. Because of the tumultuous life his parents often led, Nick spent a lot of time at the Schaeffel household. Steve and Bonnie were foster parents and had a revolving door of troubled teens and children coming through their house. They fear this may have had some influence on Nick. However, there were never any warning signs that Nick might not be as earnest as they thought. Nick and cousin Haile were close. She was also friends with his sister Rachel, and the three of them were like peas in a pod. Little Falls was a small community, and they were a family, but they shared a kinship stronger than just proximity. Sports, camping, 4x4ing, wrestling, coupled with the strong values of their family blood ties, the three built a friendship based on trust, pushing the boundaries of each other's accountability further and further. It was the summer of 2011, and although Nick worked part-time for his father's tree trimming company, he and a few of his friends found good-paying work doing odd jobs on an acreage for an old retiree, Byron Smith. This was the beginning of Nick's undoing. What should have been a summer job helping an old man around his lot became a free-for-all for the teens. It's hard to say exactly who was involved, but unbeknownst to Byron at the time, his trust and property were both abused in a string of small thefts and careless accidents. Someone, or all of them, were reckless. Returning the next summer, hoping to cash in once again on an old man's trust, it's safe to assume the group ego was injured when Byron told them he did not need them back.
A 64-year-old Little Falls man is behind bars tonight, accused of killing two Little Falls teenagers who had broken into his home. Byron D. Smith is charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of 17-year-old Nick Brady and 18-year-old Haile Kifer. Our Shane Lee brings us the details.
Byron D. Smith lives in this home on the north side of Little Falls, and a friend of his says Smith recently had been victim to several break-ins, but the latest break-in, which happened on Thanksgiving, turned tragic.
2012 saw an exponential growth in criminal activity for the once-upon-a-time blissfully content township of Little Falls. Drugs, vandalism, and thefts were all on the rise, and more concerning was it could not be singled to one particular group or age. Somewhere along the way, Nick Brady, Haile Kifer, Cody Casper, and a few other longtime friends caught a scent of the criminal underground, and it drew them in, tangled in a web of petty thefts and crimes. Neither Nick or Haile were in desperate need of money. They both had gainful income working legitimate jobs. It can be assumed that the rush of thievery cast a spell on the group, the pounding of the heart taking the first step inside a might-be-empty house, the RNG dice roll as they rifled through drawers hoping to find some trophy to briefly covet before tossing away or selling like worthless junk. Richard Bill Anderson lives next to Byron near the end of the scenic Elm Street. He and Byron were friendly, talking often. They built a good relationship, and when the break-ins started to happen, Bill recalls how unraveled Byron became. Distant and anxious, completely unlike his usual composed self. Bill was leaving Little Falls for Thanksgiving to feast with his friends and family out of town, and encouraged Byron to get out and socialize, thinking it might do him some good to unwind a little. Byron brushed it off, instead deciding to prepare his home for the next inevitable break-in, moving his cars and parking his truck down the street. Nick and Haile were expected at their homes for dinner. However, that morning they were out together, spending the time plotting their next big heist. Returned to Byron Smith's house to finish cleaning him out. Surveillance video from the cameras Byron had recently set up captured Byron as he leaves to park his truck down the street, walking back a short time later. Shortly thereafter, we see a hooded Nick as he approaches the house, the truck and cars gone. The duo was certain the house was empty. He disables a camera and tirelessly tries to find a way in. Haile joins him a short time later, and the two circle Byron's house, determined to get inside. Eventually, they find a steel pipe and break a bedroom window, gaining entrance to the house. I have edited the audio recording that follows for time, but have posted the link to the full horrific recording in the description box below. The recording begins with Byron in his basement, sitting in a reading chair nestled between two bookshelves, holed up in what he called his favorite reading spot, with a book, some bottled water and protein bars, a Ruger mini rifle, and .22 caliber revolver. He is seemingly running through a series of rehearsed answers, an ominous premonition of what's to come. We hear the breaking of a bedroom window, and Nick enters the house while Haley waits outside. Nick starts down the stairs with Byron awaiting a clear shot. He stands from his chair and fires the mini Ruger twice, hitting Nick in the shoulder and abdomen, knocking him over. With Nick now prone on the basement floor, shielding his face with his hand, Byron delivers the third and final shot through Nick's hand and into his head, instantly killing him. Byron calmly drags Nick's body to his workshop and settles back into his chair. Around 10 minutes later, Haley can be heard at the top of the stairs calling for Nick. She takes a few steps down and Byron fires his rifle again. She is hit in her stomach, tumbling down the stairs. Haley is immobilized and in a state of shock and fear. Byron takes aim again, but the rifle misfires. He coldly apologizes, and there's a brief silence as he retrieves his .22 revolver. Haley's still immobile on the basement floor. Byron fires 3 shots, any which could have been fatal. Kneeling in close, he fires the 4th and final shot, from below her jaw, up into her cranium. Byron drags her next to Nick's lifeless body in the workshop, and settles back into his chair, returning to calmly rehearsing his monologue, running through a series of practiced responses for the inevitable future conversations, justifying his actions with the twisted admission he feels he just cleaned up a mess. Here now is the edited audio.
In your left eye. Bruce, stop by tomorrow morning. No rush, but as soon as convenient. Can you do that? Yeah. Park to the north. 100 yards north of the corner, and walk in from the west. I realize I don't have an appointment, but I would like to see one of the lawyers here. You're dead. Oh, sorry about that. You're dying. Bitch. cute. I'm sure she thought she was a real pro. No rush, but, when it's convenient for you. I feel a little bit safer. Not totally safe. I'm still... No rush, but, as convenient for you. I left my house at 11:30. They were both dead by 1. I felt like I was cleaning up a mess. Worse than spilled food. Worse than vomit. Worse than shit.
Byron did not call 911 that night, nor did he call the next day. It was his neighbor, Bill, that made the call around noon on the 23rd. He had just got off the phone with an oddly cold-sounding Byron, who had asked Bill to find him a lawyer, and told him he had just blown the top off the break-ins problem they were both experiencing. Sensing something was more afoot, he obliged and called the police, who arrived at Byron's house mid-afternoon. Sergeant Luberts is the first to arrive, and he knew something was amiss the moment he greeted Byron. Leading them inside the house, Byron walks them through the events of the night before, finishing the tour at the closed workshop door. Initially, to all, despite the gruesome outcome, the investigation looked pretty straightforward. The Castle Doctrine is a Minnesota state law that allows homeowners to use lethal force in the confines of their own home if they feel as though their life is threatened. However, as investigators dug deeper, a series of things did not add up. Why had Byron parked his truck so far away from his house? Was it to give his home the appearance of being empty? Why were so many shots fired? And why didn't Byron call police or ambulance immediately after neutralizing the threats, instead waiting until the next day? The most damning discovery, however, is the audio recording of the shooting and strange monologues that precede and follow the event. Byron maintained his innocence, his right. He was still very amicable and forthcoming to investigators, answering all questions they posed to him. During the investigation, police seized the red Mitsubishi that Nick and Haley had arrived to Byron's in. Inside the car, they uncovered a hoard of stolen items from a number of different residences, including Bill Anderson's, whose house and car were broken into earlier in the day of November 22nd. His house was turned over, although not much was taken, aside from a handful of medications Bill took for his diabetes. During the trial, charges were moved from second-degree murder to first. Evidence had stacked up against Byron, proving premeditation in the shootings. Jurors who Byron would later appeal were made up of relatives and friends of the Brady and Kifers, would only deliberate for 3 hours before they returned a unanimous verdict of guilty. On April 29, 2014, Byron Smith was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole for the 2 first-degree murders of Nicholas Brady and Haile Kifer. He is being held at MCF Oak Park Heights near the city of Bayport. It is a level 5 maximum security prison that notoriously houses many of America's hardest criminals. Byron intends on running the full course of appeals, his first in 2014 denied. However, it's anyone's guess the outcome of future attempts. Byron has a large faction of supporters, many who believe he was in his right to shoot to kill, regardless of any other factors. The Castle law, applied correctly, is a measure of safety that gives many that extra level of comfort. It is clear from the photos that the last 8 years have ran a destructive course on Byron. Now, at 78 years old, it is likely he will live the remainder of his life behind bars. Guilty. In February of 2013, Cody Casper was charged with aiding and abetting in the burglary of Byron Smith's home in October of 2012, with many of the items stolen on the $50K receipt missing and unrecoverable. Other teens were implicated in this crime, including Nick Brady. However, charges were never laid. Little can be found of Cody in the media or courts following the 2012 charge, other than a Facebook page that he is active on. By all appearances, he has pulled himself off the path to a life in prison and is doing well.
There is no remedy. And I'm like,
Cody Hankmeyer continued with his poor decisions, being cited many times over the years, more recently being arrested for possession of stolen property in 2017.
I don't know how far this goes.
Following the double murder in 2012, Jesse Daniel Kreisel continued his destructive journey and became heavily involved in drugs in the criminal underground. He would be arrested multiple times for possession, most recently in 2018.
Yeah, I don't know.
On December 23, 2017, Rachel Elizabeth Brady Schafel, Nick Brady's sister, and her daughter Elena Marie were the focus of a county-wide search. She had not been seen since her visit to the Social Service Welfare Office around 2:30 p.m. the previous day, and was assumed to be traveling with her parents, Jay and Kimberly. It is unclear the reason behind the concern for their welfare. However, thankfully they were found safe late Saturday afternoon. Rachel would later be charged in 2018 with felony third-degree possession of heroin. Her list of arrests kept going. Most recently, in March of this year, 2020, she was arrested for fifth-degree possession of marijuana.
Maybe it's my dignity.
Thank you again for listening. I have posted a non-exhaustive list of sources and documents and citations, including the full-length interrogation of Byron Smith and the horrific audio recording of Nick and Haley's murder, in the description box below. I do truly appreciate your support. This channel is slowly growing and it feels fantastic. As always, I appreciate and love your comments, shares, and likes, and am keen and open to suggestions on who I should cover next.
What I do to you.
As always, until next time.
Oh baby, what I do to you. And I'm like, oh yeah, ooh, oh. Baby, I don't know how far this goes, and oh, ooh, oh. Baby, I